Gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Kelly, is now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first thing I would like to take a moment to respond to my Republican colleagues' comment that Democrats are using children as political props. These are the same tired arguments used by the gun lobby to prevent meaningful change after Sandy Hook, after Parkland. When victims and survivors speak up and demand change, the gun industry and its supporters in Congress question their motives. It's frankly shameful. Despite suffering unimaginable pain, our witnesses wanted to share their story. Even the young lady, they have dared to hope that their trauma and heartbreak could be turned into something good. They are pleading with us to do our jobs. All I'm asking my colleagues to do is open your hearts and listen, and I hope we still have enough humanity in this body to do this. We've been talking a lot about mass shootings, and I want to thank all the witnesses. I have long talked about the everyday gun violence that exists in our communities. The city of Chicago faces this every weekend, really every day. Over Memorial Weekend, 42 people were shot and 33 people were shot this past weekend. Tackling this issue will take community-based approaches. Mr. Jackson, thank you for sharing your story and the work we've done together. Your organization used community-based approaches to fight everyday gun violence through community intervention programs. Can you talk about the structural factors that drive gun violence in a community?
Yes, thank you. You know, we are big proponents for community-based violence intervention strategies because we know they can reduce the risk factors and address the root causes of violence. Over the course of the pandemic, we saw a 39% increase in homicides in the Black community. And that's not because there were less policing. That's not because sentencing wasn't harsh. That was because the other root causes of violence were intensified. When we look at the lack of access to safe spaces, economic inequality, housing instability, the reinforcement of poverty, all of those fuel violence. And then on top of that, we poured in this flood of guns into our communities. We talked about New York earlier. 84% of the guns in New York come from outside of the state. And that's what our communities are going through every single day. We're being flooded with firearms into the communities that are most vulnerable. And these community-based violence intervention strategies focus on victim services for those who have been impacted, supporting their families, providing therapeutic care for those traumatized, providing intervention tactics that work with folks in the hospitals to prevent them from retaliating. We know that 40% of the people who have been shot within 5 years will be shot again or killed without any form of intervention, and hospital-based violence intervention does this, as well as cognitive behavioral therapeutic programs that work with those who are most at risk, who maybe have had a violent history, and help them shift their lifestyle through therapeutic and behavioral changes. In certain communities, we've seen violence reduced by 60%, and I have a whole list of examples, which I can submit to the record, but we know these programs work. What we also know is that the federal government has not been investing in these efforts, and has not been funding these efforts that we know bring peace to our community, and that's why we've been working together to push such legislation.
And hopefully we can change that and get Stephen Horsford's and Senator Booker's legislation passed. Commissioner, you helped your community heal after the horrible mass shooting last month, or you're helping them to heal, but you also see the destruction recurring, gun violence in Buffalo. Can you talk about how your police department works with organizations to implement community violence intervention strategies?
I'm a strong believer in the violence interrupters strategy. We work very closely with them. They get out in the community. They can say and do things that we can't because they're credible messengers. We use them a lot in place of where police officers might go to handle a situation. They are also very helpful in getting guns turned in at times. But the problem we have is, as my colleague over here, Mr. Jackson, said, the flood of guns that are coming into our communities, the ghost guns that are coming into our communities. And one of the scariest things I just heard the other day at a gun meeting in my department is that about a half a dozen ghost guns recently were firing fully automatic, not because they had a switch on them, because they were being modified and not modified properly, I guess, if that's a term to use for a ghost gun. But it's the flood of guns that are coming in. Where are they coming from? And we don't want to take guns away from law-abiding citizens. We want to stop the flow of guns coming in.
Well, I have a trafficking/short purchasing bill I'm going to run and talk about in a little bit, because representing Chicago, we have the same problem. And really quickly to Ms. Swearer, how do you explain the number of gun owners who support what we're trying to do, or the number of Americans that support, Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter, independents. But I was at a press conference yesterday, and a swarm, they had shirts on, of gun owners support gun safety. That's what we're talking about.
It's because it's not until you actually explain to them what existing laws are and how these laws fail to actually accomplish those goals. When you actually do that, those numbers drop repeatedly. And actually, I believe I saw it might have been the New York Times had an article precisely on this today. It's just because people don't understand what's being talked about when you reference an assault weapon or a universal background check. And so when that's explained to them, that number actually drops off considerably.
Well,
The gentlewoman's
the
time
head-
has
can I just-
expired.
The head of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force is a gun owner. Val Demings is a gun owner. Many people on the task force, and they certainly know the legislation, and they're still pushing it. I yield back.
This gentlelady